So today we have with us Brenda Davis. She is a registered dietitian, an internationally acclaimed speaker, and a leader in the field of plant-based nutrition. She has worked as a public health nutritionist, a clinical nutrition specialist, a nutrition consultant, and an academic nutrition instructor. Brenda is the lead dietitian in a diabetes research project in the Marshall Islands, which we'll be hearing a lot about today. She's also a featured speaker in nutrition, medical, and health conferences throughout the world. She's the co-author of 9 award-winning best-selling books with over 750,000 copies in print, including Becoming Vegan, both the comprehensive and the express editions, Becoming Raw, Becoming Vegetarian, and Defeating Diabetes. Brenda has also authored and co-authored several articles for peer-reviewed medical and nutrition journals and magazines. So thank you so much for being with us here today, Brenda.
Oh, it's such a privilege to be a part of this summit. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Fantastic. All right. So today we're going to be talking about a lot of subjects because you're a wealth of information and we could literally talk for hours. Let's start here with the paleo diet because you know a lot about the sort of faulty science of the paleo world. So it's a really confusing topic in the world, especially for diabetes, because a lot of people are sort of educated about the fact that a low carbohydrate diet is the way to go. So let's start at the top. What exactly is the paleo diet?
So the paleo diet really is just a pattern, a dietary pattern that's trying to emulate the diet of our long ago ancestors during the Paleolithic period. And so basically people are trying to copy as close as they can that particular way of eating.
Okay, so is the current paleo diet evolutionarily accurate? Is this actually the way that we're eating now as, the paleo revolution? Is that actually how our ancestors ate?
It is so far off you wouldn't even believe it. I mean, you would think it's the same. You would think it's similar because basically what did people eat in Paleolithic times? Well, the first 80% of the Paleolithic period, they ate plants and a few insects and whatever bits of meat they could get, but very, very little. It was probably 95, 98% plants. Then the last 20% of the Paleolithic period was more hunter-gatherer, gatherer-hunter, depending on where in the world people were at. So if they were near the equator, they were eating more plants. If they were way up north, they were eating more animals. But essentially, what were they eating? They were eating plants that, as they're grown on the ground and whatever wild animals they could catch. So of course, what people are doing today is they're doing, meat and vegetables. They eliminate beans, they eliminate grains, they eliminate dairy, they eliminate alcohol, they eliminate the things that obviously you're not going to get fast foods or fried foods in the paleo world. So they're trying to do that, but what they don't realize is that the meat of today bears very little resemblance than the meat of Paleolithic times. So meat in Paleolithic times was probably 10 to 16% fat. These were wild animals running around eating greens. So they were very, very different than the domestic animals of today. And the plants were very, very different. So we breed plants to be palatable. Wild plants are very different. So it's really interesting when I have to tell you the story of how I got interested in this, because I work out at a gym and almost every single one of my fitness instructors was on a paleo diet. And it was just paleo. Everywhere I turned, everyone was doing paleo. They were even finding, food items in the stores or whatever that they bring in and tell us about. And it was just, I started getting really concerned because I realized, of course, that it was a low carb, high protein diet. And I thought, this is not good for people. So I decided to just do a little bit of research. And of course, I went first to nutritional anthropology to see what we know about real paleo diets. I thought, I wonder how close these people are. And so the first couple studies came up. One was, they were both by Boyd Eaton and Melvin Connor. And the first was, Eaton was the senior author and the second Connor was the senior author. And what was really interesting when I looked at the findings of these studies provide us with the best estimates we have for Paleolithic intakes. And there were a few things that, as a dietitian nutritionist, that just jumped out at me. And the first was, this is just shocking. Well, the first was the fiber intakes, average fiber intakes were estimated to be between 70 grams for the people eating the most meat and 150 plus grams for the people eating the most plants. And I went, whoa. And then the second thing was saturated fat was estimated, some 6 to maybe 12% of calories, total fat 20 to 30% of calories. But the other things that really jumped out at me were vitamin C, 500 to 600 milligrams, potassium, 7,000 to 10,000 milligrams. Now, the RDA for potassium is like 4,500 milligrams, and barely anybody makes it. I mean, even vegans have a hard time getting that much. These guys were eating twice that. And so where do these nutrients come from? Well, these nutrients come from where does fiber come from? Only plants. Where does vitamin C come from? Fruits and vegetables. Where does potassium come from? Mostly fruits and vegetables. So I thought to myself, how can this diet that people are doing called paleo diet, how can this diet come anywhere close to these numbers? So what I did, and I thought, I bet a vegan diet is closer to these numbers than a paleo diet. So I went on to one of the most popular paleo websites, took 3 days worth of menus, analyzed them, and compared those numbers to the estimates for Paleolithic intakes. And then I did the same 3 days of recommended vegan menus, compared. And what I ended up finding was that the only nutrients that this new paleo diet is closer to a true paleo diet, true Paleolithic diet for, were protein, vitamin A, zinc, and it was closer on cholesterol, period. The vegan diet was closer for total fat, saturated fat, essential fatty acids, carbohydrates. It was closer for 12 nutrients, for almost all of the vitamins and minerals. It was closer for fiber. So what a lot of people just don't get is that the paleo diet they're doing right now bears very little resemblance to the true Paleolithic diet. And the thing is, I think you also have to think, people in the Paleolithic period lived probably 2 or 3 decades. We now live 8 or 9 decades in many cases. You can't assume that a diet that was really well suited to a person that's going to live 30 years is really going to be best suited for longevity of an 80, 90, or 100-year-old person. So we have to consider that as well.
This is really, really fascinating to sort of distinguish the difference between what we actually ate and what we call the paleo diet today. So in terms of, let's stick with when we're talking about the paleo diet, we mean the one that people are talking about today. So that paleo diet, are there any long-term studies to show that that is beneficial?
No. As a matter of fact, I scoured the literature, and I basically found a whole bunch of very short-term studies. There's lots of studies showing reduced inflammation, reduced blood glucose, all of that short-term. But the only long-term study that I know of is the Harvard, looking at the health professionals follow-up study and the nurses' health study, found that people that were looking basically at high protein, low carbohydrate diets like the paleo diet, and what they found is that there was I think 30% reduced mortality for people that were eating low carb, where they weren't getting their protein from plants, they were getting their protein from animals, and there was a 50% increase in risk of heart disease in those people. So that was long term, but I haven't seen any other studies long term, and the findings were really quite concerning.
This is great. So can you also, I think there's like a lot of different versions of the paleo diet. So what would you define as the most common version of the paleo diet that you're talking about here?
Yeah, so that's the other interesting thing, Robbie, is the paleo diet that is being used in these research studies that's showing such beneficial effects. They're using the best paleo diet they can do. Super lean meat, mostly fish, lots and lots of vegetables and fruits, and they're making a really pretty decent diet. But what people are actually doing in the real world is really quite significantly different. So in the Paleolithic times, there were no processed meats. They didn't eat bacon and ham. Now a lot of people on paleo diets are eating, bacon, ham. They're eating all kinds of processed meat, pepperoni for a snack. So there are very, very large differences in quality of diets within the paleo movement. Now, generally, dairy's removed. They remove most of the starchy foods, so starchy vegetables, grains. But the thing that almost every expert in nutrition agrees on is that processed foods, especially highly processed foods, are not great. And as a matter of fact, when you think about food processing, what are we doing? We take a kernel of wheat, we remove everything of value to human health, we add a bunch of crap, and then we eat it. And we wonder why it doesn't support human health. How can it? We've removed everything that we need. We add a bunch of stuff like the cheapest fat, sugar, and salt, and preservatives, and chemicals, and colors, and then we eat it, and we wonder, what's going on. So we all agree that taking out the fast food, the fried food, the highly processed food is a good thing, and that we're on the same page with the paleo people on. We agree we should eat lots of vegetables and fruits. We agree, most of us, that some nuts and seeds are a good plan. And what we really disagree on is, and we actually agree that dairy is not such a good plan either. So we take out the dairy. So what we're disagreeing on is they're saying two of the foundational foods of a vegan diet should be gone: legumes and grains. And we're saying that one of the main foundational foods of their diet, animal products, are, and I shouldn't say one, but it's meat, fish, poultry, eggs, all of that should be gone. So there's where we diverge, and we diverge very significantly. And I think we have an awful lot more science on our side than they do.
Yes, this is great. I think that distinction is very, very important. So let's go into this a little more. So now, if you compare the best version of the paleo approach, the cleanest version, they want grass-fed beef, they don't, all that stuff, the cleanest version versus the diet that we're talking about here, how do those two stack up against each other?
Well, it's very simple. There are really two categories of foods that are killing people: processed foods and animal products. In the vegan whole food plant-based world, we're getting rid of both of the categories of foods that are killing people. In the paleo world, they're getting rid of one, and they're eating more of the other one, which means, when you think about meat, for example, and how meat affects health, I actually looked at, from 2010 to 2016, every meta-analysis I could find, looking at meat and mortality, meat and diabetes risk, meat and cardiovascular disease risk, meat and cancer risk. And it is, the studies are so consistent that unprocessed meat increases risk probably 10, 15, 20%, for diabetes at the higher end of those figures, and processed meat probably 40, 50% for most of those diseases. So these are not health foods. And when you think about meat, what is it that increases our risk of disease? Well, we know that meat is very high in saturated fat, which is, atherogenic. It increases risk of kidney disease and diabetes and so forth. We've got, we've got animal protein itself that can be problematic. We've got something called Nu5GC, which is a pro-inflammatory molecule. We've got carnitine that gets converted into trimethylamine oxide, or TMAO, which is a very atherogenic compound. We've got heme iron, which is a pro-oxidant. We've got the nitrosamines in processed meat that are pro-oxidants. We've got, hormones and antibiotics. And then, of course, as you move up the food chain, you increase your exposure to environmental contaminants like persistent organic pollutants and dioxins and PCBs and so on. We've got, the hormones and antibiotics that are in these foods. And then when you cook meat, because you usually cook meat, you're producing things like heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons and advanced glycation end products, all of which are carcinogenic, and they're pro-oxidants. So there are many, and of course the IGF-1 that meat increases IGF-1 levels. It actually upregulates the genes that promote disease. So it's just so much research we have showing that there are detrimental effects to eating meat, especially red meat and especially processed red meat. So to me, it makes no sense to be concentrating those foods in the diet. It makes no sense at all. And I want to tell you something. I thought this was really quite interesting. One of my favorite fitness instructors, just a phenomenal fitness instructor, was on a paleo diet. And he said he kept running across people in the paleo movement that were getting cancer. And he said that many of them switched over to a plant-based diet to fight their cancers. And one of the books that they are throwing around is called How Not to Die by Michael Greger. And so last time I was on my way into the gym, I saw my fitness instructor and he said, "Hey, Brenda, what I really want to do is a 30-day vegan challenge." And it just put joy into my heart, because I'm seeing this happening. People are starting to get that this may not be working quite as well as they hoped it would work. And there are many reasons for that.
This is brilliant. Okay, so you mentioned earlier that there's basically two food groups that the paleo diet gets rid of that are actually foundations for the low-fat plant-based movement.
Yep.
One of them is whole grains and the other one is legumes. So let's talk about both of them in detail. Let's start with whole grains, right?
Okay.
Is eating whole grains necessary? And can you tell us the health benefits of eating them?
Okay. No, it's not necessary to eat whole grains, which may come as a shock to you, but it's not necessary. You could get all the nutrients you need without whole grains. You could get your carbohydrates from starchy vegetables, which people in many parts of the world do. They might be living on breadfruit or yams or whatever the case may be. And in that case, you wouldn't necessarily have to have grains. You could do starchy vegetables, legumes, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds, and you would do fine. However, when we look at whole grains, they are significant contributors to nutrients. They provide a wonderful amount of fiber. Actually, they're the #1 source of fiber in the human diet. They are our #1 source of protein, believe it or not, worldwide. They have lots of B vitamins, so they have the potential to contribute very significantly to human health, and so they're wonderfully nutritious foods. But the reason that the paleo movement says get rid of them, get rid of legumes, is because they say two things. They say people in the Paleolithic era didn't eat these foods, and number two, they contain too many anti-nutrients, and so they're bad for us. So if we look at the first, claim, it is easily overcome, because if you look up starches and legumes in Paleolithic people, you'll see the Neanderthals ate a fair bit. You'll see the people from there are a number of populations, the Icon San. There are a number of populations where we found very good evidence that they were consuming a number of legumes and a number of grains. So that argument is a non-starter. And then if we go to the second argument about anti-nutrients, well, you look at whole grains. Well, what is the main anti-nutrient there? It's phytates. And I think it's really important for people to understand what anti-nutrients are. Anti-nutrients are compounds in plant foods that protect plant foods against predators. They help protect from releasing stored nutrients too quickly, so it can support the growth of a plant when it needs to. So they're there for a number of reasons. And yes, if you consume a ton of anti-nutrients, it will compromise your absorption of nutrients. So phytates reduce the absorption of iron, for example. They can reduce the absorption of calcium. They can reduce the absorption of zinc. And so you don't want them over consumed. So one of the things that you wouldn't do is sprinkle wheat bran on all the food that you're eating before you eat it. It's very high in phytates. Phytates are simply the storage form of phosphorus in plant foods. And the wonderful thing to know about phytates is that phytates are, they're anti-nutrients, they're easily reduced in food. So if we leaven foods, we cook food, we soak food, we sprout food, any of those things significantly reduce phytates. But the other thing that people don't realize about phytates is phytates are actually really protective to health. These are compounds that are antioxidants. They help us to repair DNA. They help, they help inhibit tumor growth. They even help protect against kidney stones. They help to protect bones. They even help to prevent amyloid plaque formation in the brain. So it's actually valuable to have some phytates in the diet. They protect us from absorbing certain things that we don't want too quickly as well. So they're actually really quite beneficial to health and longevity. So that is important to know. So with whole grains, and while we're talking about whole grains, I think it's also really important to say that a lot of people think anything that is a whole grain, so for example, whole wheat bread or puffed rice or puffed wheat or any of these foods are all wonderful whole grains. And what I think it's really important for people to understand is all whole grains are not created equal. It's like all soy products are not created equal. Like within the food world, the more processed we get, the more we increase glycemic impact, the more we reduce nutritional value. And it's the same with whole grains. So if we take a whole grain and we pick it off the plant, like for example, you pick barley off a plant, or you pick quinoa, or whatever the intact whole grain is, that's the best way to consume those foods. Intact, nothing added, nothing taken away. 90% of the grains people eat in North America are refined. So not only are they not whole grains, we've actually removed all the beneficial components before we eat them. So, it's just a really not a healthy thing to do. But within the whole grain world, even whole grains, there's a whole grain hierarchy. And so at the top of the hierarchy, you've got these intact whole grains. Then you cut the whole grains and you've got something like steel cut oats or 12-grain cereal. And then you've got rolled, you roll the grains. Well, you just imagine what you do when you roll. You increase the surface area. When you increase the surface area, you increase the rate of absorption into the bloodstream. Then you've got shredded whole grains, then ground, where you've made them into flour. Then you've got flaked, where you're putting them under a lot of pressure and you're adding things, you're doing all sorts of stuff. And then you've got puffed, 1,500 pounds of pressure, and you're destroying a lot of nutrients, and you make them dissolve in your system almost instantly. You eat those things, they dissolve, and they're absorbed more quickly than table sugar. So again, just to remember, the very best would be at the top of that hierarchy, which is intact grains, nothing added, nothing removed. You can make them even healthier by sprouting them. Sprout a whole grain and you've increased all the phytochemicals by 400% or 500%. You've increased some of the nutrients, you've just done a lot of good things. But even if you cook that whole grain, it's a wonderfully nutritious item. So just to know, all whole grains are not created equal.
I think this idea of a whole grain hierarchy is actually really important because you read these words on package labels: rolled oats and whole grain, right? Multi-grain, and we never really think about what does that adjective in front of the word actually mean. But I think what you're doing is giving a really good description here of exactly what each processing method actually results in.
Yeah, and so what it means, what it really means for people with diabetes is if you're a person like you or Robbie, Cyrus or Robbie, you guys are fit, active, you can afford to eat some bread. You can afford to eat some of the whole grains that are a little bit lower on that hierarchy because you need a lot of calories and you're not overweight. But for a person with type 2 diabetes who's overweight, it's way easier to over-consume calories when you're eating something like whole wheat flour as compared to eating something like a wheat berry or a kamut berry or a spelt berry or barley. So I draw a big black line in the sand with people who want fast results with diabetes, want to achieve them quickly. And I say, definitely don't go below the rolled whole grain. Keep it, use whole grains above that line if you want the absolute maximum that you can possibly achieve. Draw the big black line below intact whole grains and just don't consume any grains that aren't intact. And so, for example, myself, if I'm eating oats, they're oat groats. They're absolutely whole oats. Okay, and just to know, they're available, they're cheap, and they're delicious. They're really fun foods to eat because they have such texture and flavor. And once you start eating intact whole grains, you will never go back. They are so delicious. People might have tried them in a kamut berry salad or something like that, but they're not that common, because how much money does a manufacturer make off just picking the grain off the plant and selling it as it is? You know, they want to turn a 25-cent commodity into a $5 item. And so, of course, they puff it and flake it and do all those kinds of things and then sell it to us.
Okay, so let's change topics slightly here. You mentioned earlier that legumes are another food group that the paleo world condemns entirely. It says don't eat them because they contain anti-nutrients. Now, we interviewed Dan Buettner, author of The Blue Zones, and he told us that the longest lived populations in the world, every single one of them has beans as a staple in the diet. And then when we further went on to interview Dean Ornish and Joel Furman and Joel Kahn and Robert Osfeld and Neil Barnard and Thomas Campbell, all of them say very similar things. So why is it that the paleo world condemns eating legumes, even though from an evidence perspective, we know that they're actually correlated with longevity?
Yeah, and in fact, there was a study done in 2004 that showed that just 2/3 of an ounce of legumes, that's about 20 grams, reduces mortality 7 to 8%. So just unbelievable. It just this tiny, maybe a tablespoon and a half of legumes it increases longevity that much. Phenomenal. And I love the bit about the blue zones, because legumes were the only food that it was pointed out were common to every single blue zone. You think every blue zone on the planet is consuming legumes. How can anyone say that they're harmful to health? These are the healthiest, longest lived people on the planet. So it makes no sense. But what the Paleolithic world says is legumes contain these anti-nutrients like lectins and trypsin inhibitors. And trypsin inhibitors are things that don't allow us to, break protein down into amino acids and absorb and use them. And so, yes, it's true that legumes contain lectins. Yes, it's true they contain trypsin inhibitors. But what the people in the paleo world aren't telling us is these compounds are broken down when we cook the legumes. So even a short time of cooking completely breaks down these anti-nutrients. And there are even studies showing that small amounts of these anti-nutrients may actually be hugely beneficial. So it's really ridiculous to remove one of the food that we know is common to all the healthiest people, that is so protective, so hugely protective to human health, with the super low glycemic impact. It's got all these advantages, that we should remove that food because it contains these couple of anti-nutrients. It makes no sense at all to me, but that's what they do. And it's, as I said, if you eat raw kidney beans, you cook them for 15 minutes instead of cooking them for an hour and a half or whatever, and you eat them, yes, it will feel like you're going to die, like food poisoning. Lectins cause the agglutination of blood, so you get these significant problems. But we don't eat kidney beans that way. It's funny, one of the leading proponents of the paleo diet, Chris Kresser, he actually he's quite a reasonably sensible guy, but he's one of the leaders of the paleo movement, and he said that people have to stop saying that legumes do what they're saying they do, because there's only one study that ever showed legumes harm human health, and that study was on a group of people in a hospital that were fed undercooked kidney beans, and that's it. There just are no, and so that came from the paleo world, him saying, we have to stop saying this. It's just the evidence just doesn't support it.
This is great. Let's move on to another controversial, confusing topic: essential fatty acids. So you hear a lot of talk about that. Does somebody need to eat fish to get enough essential fatty acids?
Yeah, and the answer is no. And what I think is so cool is that just like, when we say we need animal protein, the essential amino acids actually come from plants. Animals have them because they've eaten plants at some point in the food chain. It's the same with these, we talk about DHA and EPA, which are the biologically active forms of omega-3 fatty acids. So in plants, you get the land plants, you get alpha-linolenic acid, and our bodies would then convert them to what we call fish fats, or DHA and EPA. Well, in fact, fish don't make EPA and DHA. They get them from plants in the ocean. It's where they come from. So we can do one of two things. We can rape the ocean. We know that 90% of large predatory fish have already been fished out. The estimates are by 2048, the fish stocks will be essentially wiped out of the ocean, and yet we're pulling out fish by the billions to get fish oil, and people are thinking they've got to take fish oil, in fact, we can culture the plants from the ocean, clean, without any mercury or any of these heavy metals from the ocean, and we can consume DHA and EPA directly from those sources. The other thing we can do is consume alpha-linolenic acid and eat a diet that is conducive to the conversion of that plant omega-3 into these long-chain omega-3s. And that involves a few things. It involves, number one, getting omega-3s from plants. So where do we get them? Flaxseed, chia seed, hemp seed, walnuts. Half the fat in greens is omega-3. So in some greens, it's even higher. So if you ate a lot of greens, the only problem is you'd need about 30 cups of greens to get enough omega-3s from greens. So you need to rely on some seeds as well, ideally, to get enough omega-3s. See, in the diet, most people get, and vegans sometimes even worse, have a ratio of maybe 10-to-1 of omega-6 to omega-3. And the ratio for optimal conversion from the short chain to the long chain fats is probably 2-to-1 to 4-to-1. And so how do we resolve that? We eat a little more omega-3 and a little less omega-6. And omega-6, where's the most, concentrated sources? All these oils people are pouring on foods, especially sunflower oil and safflower oil and corn oil and soy oil and all of these things. So if we consume a diet that's rich in greens and beans and vegetables and fruits, and then and a few nuts, and then we add some of these omega-3 rich seeds like the flax seeds or hemp seeds or chia seeds, then our balance will be pretty reasonable. We need to make sure we've got enough nutrients in the diet, because many nutrients like zinc and protein are involved in that conversion as well. And we need to do what we can to make sure that we maintain good health, so our enzymes are being produced, because we need conversion enzymes to do that conversion. So the big things are getting a source of omega-3 in the diet, not consuming too much omega-6, and not consuming too much fat. If you consume, say, 40% of your calories from fat, it actually depresses the conversion enzymes. So we want to be consuming a diet that's a little bit lower in fat to help with the conversion as well.
So just to be clear here, exactly how many grams of alpha-linolenic acid does one need to consume per day?
Okay, so the recommended intake is for women 1.1 grams and for men 1.6. But experts such as myself, over many years talking to the leading experts in the world, would suggest that we double that if we're not consuming preformed DHA and EPA. So if you're consuming some of these supplements, DHA and EPA supplements, that amount is probably enough. If you're not consuming supplements, then you need to double. So then we're looking at 2.2 grams for women and 3.2 grams for men. Okay, so what is 2.2? What is 3.2? So you're going to get enough. You're going to get, around 2-3 grams from an ounce of walnuts. You'll get that much from a tablespoon of ground flax seeds. You're going to get that much from 2 tablespoons, a tablespoon and a half, 2 tablespoons of chia seeds, from 2 or 3 tablespoons of hemp seeds. So, they're very reasonable amounts of these seeds that would be needed to give you enough essential fatty acids.
Terrific. Okay.
Now, I just want to add one other little thing. If you're pregnant or lactating, if you're a senior, if you come from a culture that has been fish eaters for generation after generation after generation, if you have diabetes, if you have hypertension, your ability to convert the plant fats to the long chain fats may be reduced, or you may need more of these long chain fats, as in the case of pregnancy and lactation. You produce better, but you need more. So for all of those people, it makes reasonable sense to consume some of the direct, some of the supplement, the DHA, EPA supplements.
Got it.
Question for you here, Brenda, real quick.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who believe that eating a lot of avocado is actually a very good source of quote unquote healthy fat, which is this sort of pop sci term that people use to describe plant-based fats. So can people derive their omega-3 fatty acids from avocados? And if so, how much would they need to eat?
Yeah, no, the answer is no. Avocados and nuts, other than walnuts, are not good omega-3 sources. They're rich in what we call monounsaturated fats. And monounsaturated fats are, relatively healthy fat. And then, of course, the healthiest place to get fat is whole plant foods. So if you need a little bit higher fat diet, some people do because they have a hard time keeping their body weight where it needs to be, especially for underweight people, for growing children, they need a little bit more fat. Avocados are a good place to get it. Nuts are a good place. Seeds are a good place. Much better than getting them from oils. Oils are to the fat world like sugar is to the carbohydrate world. You're literally extracting one macronutrient and leaving all the good stuff behind. So better to eat the avocado, the olives, the nuts, and the seeds. Now, for people that have say heart disease or chronic disease that they're trying to combat, and they need to get the most nutrients per calorie, and they're trying to watch their overall caloric intake, they need to be careful about how much of these foods they're eating, because fat has about 2.5 times the calories per gram compared to carbohydrate or protein. And so in a tablespoon of fat, you've got 120 calories. And so it's easy, if you're eating a lot of fat, to overconsume calories for people that need to be eating fewer. Now, for athletes, they can afford to eat a little bit more of the avocado and the nuts and seeds, of course, especially if they're eating 4,000 or 5,000 calories per day.
This is great. So I'd love to hear, we'd love to hear more about your work in the Marshall Islands. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, I'd love to share that with you. The Marshall Islands has one of the highest death rates from diabetes in the world. And these are islands that are in the middle of nowhere between Hawaii and Australia. These folks probably 80, 90 years ago had absolutely no diabetes. It was just unheard of. They lived off the land, they ate plants, they ate fish. About 50% of their diet was actually coconut. 50 or 60% of their calories came from coconut, which is quite shocking. But anyway, they had no diabetes, they had very little chronic disease at all. Today, 95% of the population has either diabetes or prediabetes, the adult population, I mean. And it's very, very sad, because they live off now, just to talk about what they eat. They're consuming white sticky rice with a GI of about 83, with Spam or barbecued chicken, and they wash it down with this sweet beverage called luau. And luau, the #1 ingredient is high fructose corn syrup. For breakfast, it's donut and coffee or something like that. The children, their absolute favorite snack is deep fried ramen noodles, those dried crinkly noodles in those packages. And they crack open, they eat them without cooking them, and they sprinkle, before they eat them, they sprinkle Kool-Aid powder on top. I once saw a kid sprinkling white powder on top of the Kool-Aid powder, and I asked what on earth they were putting on their ramen noodles, and they said, oh, that's Ajinomoto, pure MSG. That's just shocking. And I could not design a diet to induce diabetes more efficiently than the diet that the Marshallese people have adopted. And so it's just absolutely heartbreaking, because there's you know, people say, oh, it's genetic. Yeah, right. I mean, 80 years ago, they didn't have any. I don't think genes change quite that quickly. But anyway, it's really quite astounding. And so what we did in 2006, we went in with a team and we took 5 overlapping cohorts, and we screened people, and they were randomized to either a control group or the intervention group. And the intervention group was treated with a plant-based diet, exercise, and you know, lifestyle changes. They were with us for about 3 months. The first month with us, several hours, probably 7 or 8 hours, 4 times a week. So it was a lot. They ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They did exercise. They did all kinds of educational courses, like everything from learning how to garden. We helped them to plant gardens in their homes, to just try to get them to live sort of the old-fashioned lifestyle. And I was absolutely astounded at how quickly things changed for them. In a week, these people that could barely walk across a room because of the tremendous pain in their legs, they were walking pain-free. It was unbelievable. The fog in their brain just evaporated. Just incredible changes. We saw changes in 3 months, A1Cs of about 2 points. Blood glucose dropped in a week or 2 by 75, 100 points. It was just unbelievable. And so we did the study, and this is a long time ago, but we're still working on getting the research out, which should happen in the next year for sure. But we go back every year, and we're working with these people and trying to help change the foundation of the food foundation of the culture, and get them back to more traditional foods, and particularly helping them to grow plant foods and getting them to consume legumes, which are cheap, non-perishable kind of foods. Are a wonderful addition. You know, these people were consuming 5 grams of fiber a day, and we would get them to 50 or 60 grams of fiber a day fairly quickly. And it was just, we had people that were going to the bathroom once every week or 2. And all of a sudden they're going, I kid you not, and all of a sudden they're going to the bathroom every day. And it scared them. It actually scared them. They thought there was something wrong with them. But the speed at which their health turned around was absolutely phenomenal. It's really quite amazing.
I'd imagine that going to the bathroom once a week to go to the bathroom on a daily basis might actually scare you. You might think, oh, something's wrong.
Exactly, they did. I had people pull me into the office and say, I think there's something wrong with me. I'm going to the bathroom every day.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that we work with in particular who transition towards a plant-based diet, and they start to experience that right away. And then, oh, I'm going to the bathroom once or sometimes even twice a day. And we say, hey, congratulations. That's actually a normal bowel movement right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so if you had to give us your 60-second elevator pitch for, what should somebody particularly living with diabetes eat in order to transform their blood glucose control now, and then also maintain a diet that's good for a long period of time, a sustainable diet, what would you say?
Absolutely, you need to be consuming a lot of beans and greens. So beans and greens, foundational foods. As many colorful vegetables and fruits as you can. I mean, fruits a little less than what you would do vegetables, but maybe, I'm talking at least 10 servings a day of vegetables and fruits. You want to be consuming intact grains. The starchy vegetables you pick, you want the most colorful ones available, the purple potato, the orange sweet potato. You want to get the most phytochemicals. See, your goal is really to have every single calorie that crosses your lips be contributing to health and healing rather than contributing to death and dying. And so that's really the goal. And so nuts and seeds, I would say an ounce or 2 a day for most people is a reasonable amount. Include a source of omega-3 fatty acids. That's absolutely imperative. So those are the keys. Now, the one thing that I'd like to say is just know, this is so important, just know that there is nobody on the planet that can do this for you. You are the captain of this ship. There's no doctor that can write a prescription and really reverse your diabetes, because diabetes is a lifestyle induced disease, and it is one of the most reversible diseases. Type 2 diabetes I'm talking about. So type 2 diabetes, probably 90% of people with type 2 diabetes can reverse their disease, but it's really up to them. You have every single thing you need to accomplish that task. Every single thing you need is right here, and trust me, you're not alone. You have support systems that you wouldn't even believe, like the support you guys provide. There are many wonderful books that will help to guide you. There are support groups all over the place. This is doable, and it's a choice that you can make. You can choose to live or you can choose to die. And the problem with diabetes is the way people die is not much fun. I watch people in the Marshall Islands, it's like this snowball. They get diabetes, their vision starts to go, their kidneys start to go, they get their legs cut off, and then they die. And it is completely and totally avoidable. And we need to get that. This does not have to happen. We can reverse this process. You can avoid diabetes, and if you have diabetes, you can reverse diabetes. And, nobody can do it for you, but you can do it.
This is incredible. Your message is so clear. It is so clear. It is so straightforward, and you have so much research backing all of the statements that you make. So I want to personally thank you for the time that you've given us today. We've learned so much, and I think the distinctions you make between, various food groups and really boiling it down to something that's very simplistic is very, very helpful. So thank you so much.
Well, I just so appreciate what you guys are doing. Thank you. You are changing the world, and I feel very privileged to have been a part of it. Thanks so much.